Astronomy has a very long and glorious history. This is a rough timeline of astronomy. Astronomy has been studied for as long as there have been stars. In 4000 BC, the Mesopotamians have some of the first recorded studies of the stars. They built observatories and tracked the movement of the stars in order to keep time. They also created the zodiac symbols that we know and still use today. At the same time, the Egyptians were also studying the stars. The Egyptians used the stars to create their calendars and to predict when events such as floods would happen. Many buildings, including the pyramids, were aligned with the stars. Unfortunately, little of what the Egyptians wrote about the stars has survived to today. At around 2600 BC, Stonehenge is believed to be created. No one knows quite why Stonehenge was built. There are many theories, including that it was used for religious ceremonies, a way to track time, or even it was a burial site. What is known is that the Stonehenge is aligned with the moon and the sun. More important discoveries were made by the Chinese. The earliest records found date back to 433 BC and were of a list of 28 different constellations. The Chinese recorded over 900 solar and lunar eclipses and also recorded other astrological events such as Halley's Comet. Thales was a Greek philosopher who lived around 546 BC. He created Thales' theorem, which he used to calculate the height of the pyramids, which was really revolutionary at the time. Then at around 500 BC, Pythagoras, another Greek philosopher, created a new model of the solar system. In this model, all the planets are actually circular and revolved around what Pythagoras called a central fire, which was blocked by a counter-Earth. At around the same time, the Babylonians were also creating records of the moon and other planets. They believed that the planet positions could affect Earth life and people's fortunes. Aristotle is a very famous Greek philosopher who was born around 384 BC. Circle because the objects would fall straight down everywhere if they weren't circles. Aristarchus, not to be confused with Aristotle, was born around 310 BC and applied geometry and astronomy to try and find the distance to the moon and the sun. However, he never actually tested his equations to see if they were correct. Aristophanes was another Greek philosopher with an unfortunate name, born around 276 BC. He used geometry to calculate the size of the Earth. However, we don't know how accurate his calculations were because the measurements could have been different from modern-day measurements. Astronomer who lived around 134 BC. Hipparchus had discovered a new star, which led him to categorizing over 850 other stars. He noticed that the positions of stars were slightly different than previous records that had been kept. He estimated that there were shifts in stars. However, his estimates were about 10% slower than stars actually shift. Mayans were heavily interested in astronomy, although few of their records concerning astronomy have survived to today. The Mayans' buildings were aligned to the positions of the sun at equinoxes, and significant events were always timed to the position of Venus's. Thankfully, extensive records of Venus's positions and the moon have survived. Ptolemy was an astronomer who lived around 90 AD. He created tablets that would predict the positions of the planets. He also wrote the Almagest, which is the only surviving comprehensive ancient book on astronomy. Islamic astrology dates all the way back to 400 AD. Many Islamic astrologers improved how planetary positions were calculated, and many of the names they came up for stars are still used today. They also translated and preserved many ancient works, and they improved the accuracy of older records. Copernicus was an astronomer who lived around 1500 AD. He proposed the first fully developed heliocentric solar system model. Heliocentric means that all the planets revolved around the sun. Another astronomer who lived around 1500 AD was Brahe. He made an impressive catalog of stars and also made observations on a supernova, which he called a new star. Galilei was another famous astronomer who lived around 1500 AD. He's most famous for supposedly making the telescope, although that he actually didn't invent it. He did, however, find new stars and realized that the sizes of stars had been overestimated. He also discovered that the moon has valleys and mountains just like the Earth does. Kepler was an astronomer in the 17th century who discovered a mathematical relation between the distances of planets and their periods of rotation. He has 3 laws named after him. Isaac Newton was an astronomer who lived around 1600 AD, and he discovered the three laws of motion. The first law is that an object at rest tends to stay at rest, whilst an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. The second law being that when a net force acts upon an object, it produces a change in the momentum of the object in the direction of the force. And the third is that when one body exerts a force on a second body, the second body also exerts an equal force on the first body. And also discovered the concept of gravity in a rather famous experiment. At the same time, Edmund Halley was making discoveries of his own. Edmund had this job of assigning flame-speed numbers to the stars. He made observations on the island of St. Helena to categorize the stars, and he observed that the transit of Mercury was similar to the transit of Venus, and he realized that he could calculate the size of the solar system. If you've been in a science class before, chances are you've heard of Einstein. He's most famous for his theory of relativity, which he discovered in 1905, which states that E equals mc squared. This equation caused major changes to the mechanics that had to do with the speed of light. He also discovered that light was made out of isolated particles. He also made theories that had to do with general relativity. Niels Bohr in 1913 created the Bohr atomic model, which showed that electrons traveled around the nucleus. The Copenhagen University Institute for Theoretical Physics was named after him as well. Wolfgang Pauli in 1924 proposed a new quantum degree of freedom. He stated that no two electrons could exist in the same quantum state. He also created Pauli matrices, which served as a basis of spin operations. Heinsberg was born in Germany, and in 1925 he developed the matrix mechanics formulation of quantum mechanics. He also made a neutron-proton model of the nucleus. He was attacked in the newspapers by Socialist Party for contributing to scientific discovery. Edwin Hubble helped establish the field of extragalactical astronomy, a branch of astronomy that was concerned with objects outside of our own Milky Way. In 1929, he published Hubble's Law, and the Hubble Space Telescope is named after him. Lemaitre was a Belgian priest who proposed the theory of the expansion of the universe. He also proposed the Big Bang theory, and in 1927, Lemaitre derived Hubble's Law. Oppenheimer was a teacher and astrophysicist in the 1950s. He discovered the first brown dwarf and did active research on white dwarfs and exoplanets. Not long after, Hoyle, an astronomer, contributed to the stellar nucleophysicists while still rejecting the Big Bang theory. In 1962, two workers named Pensy and Williamson were working at AT&T. When using a telescope, they noticed that there was background noise. This background noise was discovered to be cosmic radiation. In 1969, two astronomers named Armstrong and Aldrin were the first people to walk on the moon, in a program that was ironically named MISS. Astronomy Timeline has been brought to you by Kelly Conway.